Let's get to the reason why I'm here tonight. Nesrine Changuel, I'm super excited to host her here. She came here all the way from France to launch her awesome book on product delight. Those of you that read my book know that I really love delight and think it's a really important topic. And there's not a lot of coverage out there on it. So it's super awesome that someone who really is an expert in the field wrote a whole book about it. And so if you're not familiar with her background, she's worked at amazing places like Google on Google Chrome and Meet, Spotify, Microsoft, Bell Labs. She has a PhD, and she's in all the way from France, like I said, to share her advice with us. So please join me in warming a warm welcome for Nesrine. Come on up.
I'm so excited to be here again. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Dan, for hosting this event. Big thank to Miro and Atlassian again for sponsoring and being like a sponsor, not only for the book, but also for the topic that is very close to my heart. So as Dan said, I flew from Paris 3 days ago, so I'm not jet lagged anymore. I'm full capacity today, and I'm excited to share, at least give you a tiny small summary of the book. So and luckily you have the entire book, so you can also dig deep into it. So for those who don't know me, or not very well at least, I had the chance to work on globally used and loved products across the globe. Oh no, I'm not supposed to move away. Yes. So yes. So right after my PhD, I jumped from research to product. I first joined Skype, and then loving the area and loving Sweden, I moved to Sweden, worked for Spotify, and then jumped into Google as a product leader for Google Meet and then for Google Chrome. And also something that I love doing a lot, and that's throughout my entire career, I think I started even from research, was going on stage and talking about whatever I'm passionate about. And so I remember one time I was in a conference in Lisbon, and the conference organizer actually asked me a tricky question. He said, like, hey, Nesrine, being an insider and working on these large, big tech company, have you seen any trend or anything in common that shaped the success of these products? And as I told you, it's a tricky question because I was not even able to answer that question at that time. But I sit down, while thinking about that, I came to the conclusion that yes, there is actually something in common while building products at companies like Google, Microsoft, and Spotify. They all invest heavily into creating emotional connection between their products and their users. So from that conversation, from that thought, I started to dig deep into the topic, train myself even more, getting to the point that I'm speaking about it and publishing the book about it today. So what is emotional connection? In order to get into what emotional connection is, I want usually to start always by asking this very simple question. What's your favorite product? It might sound like an interview question, but what I love about this question is the variety of answer I get out of that question. Like people sometimes pick questions, like a products based on the functionality they get out of it, or sometimes they pick products out of the feeling they get while using the product. And that's very exciting because we connect with products at different levels. We might connect with products for of course, the productivity side that we get out of that, or we connect with products also for the feeling that we get while using it. And that's the essence of delight. The essence of delight is when you create products that blend the two dimensions. Understanding that users do have functional needs and some emotional needs, and while you are crafting solutions, you craft them with these two minds all together into the same core experience. Okay. So that's how Product Delight was born. And by the way, you might be questioning, like, why calling it delight and not just emotional connection? The reason is because every time I talk to a founder or a leader or a VP, they all agree on one thing. We should delight our customers. We should delight our users. But here is the truth. They all agree, but they also all don't know how to. Most of them, at least, they don't know how to delight their customers. So that's why I put my research hat again a couple of months ago, and I started to at least coming up with a solution or framework, something that could be actionable, everybody can put in place into their products and industry. Okay, so in order to get into what delight is, and I promise it's the unique theoretical slide for tonight, then we will move straight to the practical part. What is delight? So delight is an emotion. It's what we call secondary emotion. And there is this professor called Professor Plutchik who actually conceptualized all emotions into something he called wheel of emotions. And he actually conceptualized the light as a combination of two primary emotions. What are the two primary emotions? What do you think? What conceptualized the light?
Fear.
What? Joy, yes. And what's the second? Surprise, absolutely. Actually, think about yourself now in a moment, experiencing joy and surprise at the same time, then you are delighted. Okay? We're done with theory. Okay, so how do we put that in practice now? The beauty is that actually delights rely on three main pillars, and we're going to work through these three main pillars all together today. The first one is actually all about removing friction. The second, anticipating users' need. And the third is about exceeding users' expectations. Let's go through them one by one so we get like a better sense of what I mean. First one, removing friction, removing users' friction. Actually, when anyone, like anytime you're using a product, we go through what we call a journey of emotions. Let's think about yourself. Walking in the airport, you might experience some excitement, some stress, confusion, whatever. So this is what we call the journey of emotions. And during the journey, we do have some peak moments. These are like the excitement and the positive emotions. And we do have some what we call valley moments, like less exciting ones. And so if we try to work on these valley moments and leverage them a little bit so we can improve and reduce the friction that uses my experience. And I have a story to share with you because actually, funny enough, 3 weeks ago, I've been in Stockholm and I took the opportunity to meet with some ex-friends and colleagues from Skype and Spotify. And we went to a place that's a restaurant called The Griffins. It's not like very special, like just good vibe and good service, good food. But when you go with friends, there is one moment, an awkward moment, at least for me, I hate that moment, which is the bill. Like, who had wine, who did not? Are we gonna split evenly? Are we paying separately? And while all those thoughts were crossing my mind, the waiter came and she actually placed a piece of paper with a QR code. You scan it, you select what you want to get out of the list, and you pay, all in a seamless way. Maybe it's very popular. Does it exist in the US, by the way? Actually, I did experience it for the very first time, and it actually turned what was supposed to be an awkward moment into something like, let's say, delightful or joyful. So that's one example of reducing friction or reducing users' fear or whatever negative emotion that any user might experience. Second pillar, anticipating users' needs. Actually, remember, I said something earlier, which is in Delight, there is this concept of surprise. If you have to wait for your users to tell you exactly what they need from you, they will not be surprised. You will just honor their asks and they will be satisfied. You will be meeting their needs, not anticipating them. So here is a story again to explain what I mean by anticipating needs. So it happens that three months ago, I had a family trip and we went to Singapore. And as soon as we landed there, I realized that my French mobile plan do not work in Singapore. I was not able to have data or have international calls. So of course I had two options, either pay for extreme high roaming fees like back in 10 years ago, not even 10 years, 20 years ago, felt like so old. Or try to find a local SIM. And that was the moment that I realized that on my Revolut app, I know Revolut is not very popular in the US, but it is extremely popular in Europe. So on my Revolut app, there was a feature called eSIM, and you go to there and you can get a local eSIM right from the app. Honestly, like Revolut is a bank app, and I don't even think that Revolut users really requested from Revolut to have eSIM. However, Revolut knows so well their users. They know that most of their users are international, they are expats, they are travelers. So of course, some of their needs might be to need an eSIM. And by the way, the experience was so fast and so easy, 2 clicks, and that's a real screenshot I took at that time. So that's an example of anticipating users' need by knowing them better than they do. Pillar number 3 is about exceeding expectation. It's about going beyond, again, to give them not only the surprise, but also the joy that we're hoping for. And to explain that, one more stories. People love stories, so why not? Actually, this is something that happened to me a few weeks ago. I was trying to catch my train, the Eurostar, from Paris to London, and I was late, as usual. So I ordered an Uber, and it happens that the Uber driver, for some reason, canceled while coming to my place. Okay, I was so stressed. I'm gonna miss my train for sure. And luckily, there was a taxi driver passing in front of my place at that time, so I jumped into the car, saved. I made it to the train station. But as soon as I arrived to the train station, I realized that actually Uber, when the driver cancels your trip, they assign you a new driver. So a new driver was assigned to me, came to my place, and I was charged for the waiting, and I was charged for the trip that I didn't take. Not necessarily a good surprise this time. It's more like a disappointment than a delight. But I was also prepared psychologically to write that long explanation, like I thought he will never come. And in my mind, I was already almost repeating what I should be writing. But you know what happens? All you have to do, 2 clicks. You go ask for a refund and done. It turns a 35 euro bill that was already charged into zero. Not a single request for explanation. For me, that's by far exceeding expectation, because at that time, my expectation was to prepare for explanation or whatever. Or maybe wait for months to get, or weeks to get refunded. Okay, that's about the 3 pillars. So we should remember, if we should remember the pillars, it's about removing friction, anticipating needs, and exceeding expectation. Now, once we get that, we need to get into how do we put that into your product. You have products that are used by many users, so how can I tomorrow start like introducing delight and get them delighted? I created what I call the delight model. So the delight model, think about it as a mental model or a simple framework. I know framework, people hate the word frameworks. I avoid using the word framework, but it's more like something that you can start thinking about more than something like as a process. And it starts with as simple as identifying users' motivators. The first step of the model is to make sure that we understand why our users are using our products. What motivates our users to use the product? And now that I'm actually coaching organizations and product teams, I realize that, of course, every time you build a product independently of the product you're building, you start by segmenting your users into personas. But what I've seen most of the time is most product teams use demographic segmentation, which is about who are they, gender, location, age, whatever. And at best, if you're lucky, they're doing behavior segmentation, which is what are they doing, what's their behavior, etc., and to get to know them a little bit more. But the very best segmentation is the motivational segmentation, which means the why behind using the product. And it might look surprising, but users are using the product for different reasons. I mean, we think that they are using it for the primary reason that the product is serving, but there are plenty of reasons why your users are using your product. So usually I distinguish between what I call the functional motivators and the emotional motivators. What I mean by functional motivators, think about them like I want to send an SMS, I want to book a flight, I want to listen to music. These are functional motivators. That's why you go to a certain product. However, emotional motivators could be something like I want to feel less lonely, I want to feel present, I want to feel connected, I want to be part of something. So it's really important when you're building whatever product or whatever feature to list those. Have these conversations with your users in order not only to identify functional motivators, but also identify emotional motivators. And by the way, every time I talk about this topic with companies, I realize that product teams are really good at identifying functional motivators. They will come up with a long list. But when I ask about emotional motivators, it's like, I don't know, maybe I should pay attention more to that. Let's do a case study just to make sure that we understand the concept. Let's do a case study with a product that's close to my heart. I love using it. Very popular, very used, Spotify. What could be the functional motivators for using Spotify? Easy. Of course, I mean, maybe it's about enjoying high quality content. It's about discovering new content. It's about searching for content. By the way, I heard like listening to music. I sometimes go to Spotify because I have a specific song I want to listen to. Like, let's say Taylor Swift just released her album. I want to listen to it, so I'm not behind. Or sometimes I have no idea what I want to listen to. No idea, just inspires me. So these are different types of motivators, what like we should list. And the list could be much, much longer, by the way. It could be podcast, could be whatever. But just to give you the sense of what I mean. What could be emotional motivators? What if we're trying to guess some emotional motivators for using Spotify? Yeah, change your mood. Yeah, nostalgia. Yes, of course. Connection. I mean, a lot. You see, now that we're doing the exercise together, it could be like even a list of 15 or 20. The thing is about thinking about them so that we list them. It could be like sometimes I put Spotify because I want to have some vibe and I feel less lonely or to feel more productive. That's the way how I am the most productive or write a book or whatever. So here I'm listing a few of them. It's about feeling immersed, self-expression, feel connected, nostalgia. These are emotional motivators that we need to think about. And again, the list could be much longer than this. What I highly recommend is like as a very first step of the delight model to start by listing them. It could be just as simple as bullet points. Now, let's imagine you did your homework and you already have a great list of functional motivators and emotional motivators. What should we do? How can we get that in now, like concrete, into our roadmap? I tweaked very little the very famous double diamond framework. I know double diamond is very famous in the product space. So the way how I tweaked it is by starting from the motivators. So if you already have few motivators, initiator, all you have to do is in this opportunity space, before even jumping into the solution, start by identifying what could be potential opportunities in my product so that I can honor these motivators. Once you identify the right opportunities, then you go crazy and you identify a few solutions for them. And of course, you prioritize and add them into your roadmap. And I'm pretty sure since we're all in the product space, we work with brilliant engineers. And at least in my case, I had a chance to work with the best ideator on earth. Like when we work with engineers at Google or Spotify, or whatever company, by the way, I mean, it's not difficult to generate ideas. It's the easiest part, by the way. If we give the space and the opportunity for engineers to think with us, then we will end up with plenty of ideas. Now, the question is, how can we identify if this idea is the right one? It's the delightful one. That's the one that will create this very well-needed emotional connection. For that, I created another tool that I call the Delight Grid. And I'm going to spend the next few slides explaining how to use the Delight Grid, what it is. And it starts with, remember that I told you earlier you need to identify the motivators, like the emotional motivators and the functional motivators? You're going to go ahead and list them in the grid. So think about these are the functional motivators, and these are the emotional motivators. And your starting point is to have this empty grid. All you have to do is like go to this ideation board, and you will place your ideas based on the motivator that this solution is honoring for. So for example, this idea is only honoring for a functional motivator, no emotional motivators. This one is honoring for both, like an emotional motivators and a functional motivators. Why do we do that, by the way? What's important? It's the first step for categorizing features. Because if your feature is honoring only for one or few functional motivators, you belong to what I call the low delight. I mean, these are features that are functional and they don't serve any emotional need, but they are very much needed. It's not like we don't have to do, it's low delight. The second category is what I call the surface delight, which means that these are features that are only serving for an emotional need. There is absolutely no functional need. Maybe you're wondering, what could be a feature that is only serving for an emotional need? The other day was my birthday, and my Apple Watch popped with notification, like with balloons and colors, says, "Happy birthday, Nesrine." There's absolutely no functional need there. But of course, made me smile. I mean, why not? It's this, what I call the surface delight category. The third category, what I call also the sweet spot, is the deep delight. Deep delight is when you have a feature that is, of course, serving for a functional need, but it's done in a way that is also honoring one or few emotional needs. So that's the basic of the delight grid. It's about identifying, categorizing features and ideas in order to get a sense of how much of my ideas are low delight, how much of my ideas are surface delight, and how much of them are deep delight. And now that you're wondering probably how much should I put of each of those, I came with, maybe before I give what I came with, I want to highlight like back to the case study of Spotify. I want to do this exercise again with you. Like, since we started identifying the motivator, maybe you can place the ideas. So what I did is that I placed the functional motivators that we discussed earlier here and the emotion motivators on the top. And I want to do this exercise with you. These are 3 features that I get a chance to work closely on during my time at Spotify. So the first one is like a search by lyric. You know, when you don't have the exact title of the song, but you have some random words. So that's one. The second, the very loved Wrapped, the end of year retrospective that we get toward the end of the year. And of course, Discover Weekly. This is your personalized playlist, a weekly playlist. So how do we place those ideas? For me, it's funny because actually I gave the exact same talk 3 weeks ago at Spotify. And I was a bit scared because are they going to disagree or agree with me? It was lovely. A feature like search by lyric is definitely something that will serve the search for an audio content. It will help users search and find a song or a track much more easily, but there is no necessarily an emotional connection there. A feature like Wrapped now, there is no functional lead into it. All you get out of Wrapped is probably how cool you are, so that you share it with your friends and your colleagues. By the way, my ex-colleague at Spotify have been trying hard to find some functional motivators to Wrap. It is. It's a huge one, yes. And the third feature, of course, Discover Weekly, is definitely related to discovering new content. It helps you discover and find new tracks, but also in a self-expressed way, in a personalized way, in a way that people connect and feel related and heard and seen. So that's definitely a deep delight category type of features. Okay, now I'm getting to the rule. I actually created a rule that I call 50, 40, 10. Hey, Dan warned you. No. Don't worry. So 50, 40, 10 is a recommendation, let's say. It's usually because most people, when I talk about these 3 type of categories, get to me and say, hey, Nesrine, how do I balance between low delight, deep delight, and surface delight? And 50, 40, 10 is a rule that says 50% of your features in the roadmap should be low delight. You might be surprised now, like, hey, Nesrine is coming to talk about delight, and now she's saying 50%. Of course, because your product has to function first. I mean, that's the main reason why you exist and the business exists. And then 40% is about deep delight. These are features that are, of course, functional, but done in a smart way, in an emotional way. And why not this 10%? I mean, let's push for it. This 10% of surface delight, these features that will celebrate, these features that will make us smile from time to time, but not more than 10%, because otherwise we may fall into what I call the confetti effect, like too much Easter eggs, too much confettis for no reason. Okay, now, actually, now that I spoke about the delight model, told you about how to start identifying the motivators, how to use those motivators in the delight grade, I want to share with you a few delighters. And in the book, you have 9 delighters, by the way. I just picked 4. These are some of the tools that I personally get a chance to use a lot during my career, so why not sharing 4 out of 9 with you tonight? Number 1 is, of course, let's say the most powerful and the easiest and the one that is driving the most success, of course, for the product is personalizations. Like, that's why Starbucks will struggle writing our name, even sometimes they are so hard to write, because we do not connect with, hey, let's say number 35, your coffee is ready. Like, Yeah, we don't connect with that way of being called. It's not only about our name, by the way, it's about our tastes, our preferences. That's why like features like Discover Weekly or Netflix recommendations are so successful, and they manage to get us so hooked. Number two is the celebration. Actually, this is something I love talking about, because remember that journey I spoke about earlier? I spoke about peak moments and leveraging these peak moments. Actually, even the valley moments, we need to work on them, but the peak moments are also opportunities to connect with users at emotional levels. They are happy, they are excited, they are open to appreciate and to connect with the products. And the story I have here to share with you, I'm actually an Airbnb user, both as a guest, but also as a host, as a place I put for rent. And something that I'm very let's say serious about is keeping my superhost badge. I love doing it. I do my best to keep my superhost badge. And of course, Airbnb reassess my ability to remain superhost every 3 months. So every 3 months, when I open the app, and if I'm still a superhost, the app turns into confetti. It feels like like a surface delight, but I also feels like the app is celebrating this moment with me, and it recognizes the effort that I put into being a good host. So celebration is an example of delighter. Another example is seasonality. I mean, the reason why I mentioned seasonality, because I played a lot with that. Like during my time at Google Meet, we actually introduced background replace. Of course, we started by introducing background replace as a static image, but then we kept like it's a very regular habit. We always introduce like seasonal backgrounds. We played with Diwali, we played with Christmas, with Ramadan, even with the Olympic Games sometimes. It's always an opportunity. And what I love about this example is that we always see peaks of adoption. People love it. Like it trigger curiosity, it trigger adoption, it trigger retentions. So it has a huge effect on all the products metrics. And I'm keeping my favorite to the last. So this is the lighter number 4. It's about humanizing the products. What does it mean, humanizing a tech product? What it means is that, think about it, that if my product was a human being, let's go back in time. It's not tech. How the experience could be better? If the product is a human being, how could the experience could be better? Actually, I had a very interesting, and now you're wondering why Nesrine is putting a vacuum cleaner here. I had an interesting conversation with Andy. Andy is a head of product from Dyson. And I told Andy, like, how come I love my vacuum cleaner? Like, I have a Dyson at home and I'm super proud showing it to my guests, and it's a vacuum cleaner. And so he told me something that sticks, like really interesting thing. He said, we never compare our vacuum cleaner to our competitors, let's say Electrolux or Bosch or whatever. We always compare our vacuum cleaners to, what if I hire a real person to come and clean my house? Because if you hire a real person to come and clean your house, you might ask that person to clean in a certain way or to start with a certain room. And they actually get inspired by this kind of recommendation in their way of building their robots. And the interesting fact is that's exactly what we did at Google Meet. When I worked for Google Meet, we never, ever compared Google Meet to Zoom or Teams. What did we compare Google Meet to? What? Of course. If we were all having this meeting all together in the room, how the experience could be better. And by doing that, you raise the bar. You raise the bar so high that that's, for example, the essence where features like raise hand was born, or emoji reaction were born as well. Like, because you're comparing the product to the best ideal scenario. Okay. Now, I'm actually want to make sure that this is extremely important, by the way. Delight is not something that you add once in your roadmap and then you forget about it and think about functionality all the rest of the year. It's a culture. And I've seen this working so well in the company where I worked for, because leaders are driving for it as part of the product culture. We even had sometimes pillars, like product pillars called Delight, in order to remind our product teams and our engineers to build in a way that delight the customers. And in the company where I work, we already have this habit of hack days. And hack days are great opportunities, of course, to think outside of the box and to innovate and not be restricted by bets and strategy. And so it helps like fostering the culture of innovation. And inspired by that, I introduced what I call the Delight Days. And Delight Days are opportunities that I teach, of course, and I help organizations setting this kind of concept in their workplace, where we actually meet together as product teams. We think about delightful features. We do it in such a playful way that motivate the teams and, of course, get the delight into a cultural thing. Okay, I'm getting to the end of my talk. I'm super happy, of course, to put this in a book. Actually, I quickly realized that this topic is much, much bigger to be just for talks and workshops. So I was very happy to get Product Delight out last week. So it's celebrating 10 days today. And I'm super excited to see bestseller in the US. It's still for the third day in a row. So thanks again for being part of this journey. Thanks again for being here. It means a lot for me. It's not over, but it's just the beginning. And I hope you will enjoy it. With that, I want you to leave with 3 key messages. Let's say if you need to keep 3 key messages out of the day, it's mainly delight is not a nice to have, at least not anymore. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. It's your way to differentiate. It's your way to stand out in such a crowded market. The second thing, delight is actionable. It's not a buzzword anymore. It's been a buzzword for so many years, but not anymore. There's a framework, there's a model, there's a way of doing it. And I've seen it working so well in the company who mastered it. And delight is a culture. It's definitely not about sprinkling joy on top of utility. It's definitely something that you can add continuously in your product and your organization. With that, thank you so much for listening. Of course, if we're not connected, feel free to connect. I also started a newsletter recently where I publish delight tips or delight stories. The fun part is that since I started talking about delight, random people are reaching out, sharing their delightful stories. And so sometimes, if they permit me to do, I share them on my newsletter as well. Oh, yeah, of course. If you can, I would love to. I mean, this project means a lot to me, and your presence means a lot to me as well. But we live in a world where word of mouth helps a lot. So feel free to talk about it. Feel free to leave a review on Amazon if you like it or if you like the talk. It means a lot, of course. Thank you.
Thanks. That's yeah, just to echo this slide, it's really important when you have a new book out to get early reviews. And so part of why we do these book launch is and get this book in your hands as soon as it's out. You're the early adopters of this. You're the ones that are excited about it. So check it out. I'm already excited because I saw some really cool frameworks in there that I'm excited to dig into deeper. And I've already read, quite a bit of the book already. So it's good. So yeah, definitely help support on Amazon if you could. And now we'll do Q&A. So the way Q&A works, you raise your hand. You have to have a mic so that the people on Zoom can hear it, and so we get it for the video. So please just raise your hand if you have a question for Nesrine, and we'll get you a mic.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. I guess. Okay. So I should go ahead. So I saw the delight grid there. So on the x-axis, we have like all this kind of the emotional motivators. But I feel like, so how do you limit the number? Because I can imagine if like a bunch of stakeholders stay together, they will say, oh, this emotion is very important too. Like, how would you kind of limit this kind of the just go
Okay.
expand
The question is,
in
how can we make sure that I think there are 2 questions here. First, how do we capture that we have the right emotional motivators that we need to focus on? And how can we make sure that we have also the right number, not too high?
Yes, exactly.
And to answer the first one, the best way to capture emotional motivators is to interact with users. There's nothing that beats that. Like, it's all about having as many conversations and pay attention to the emotional fact and cues while talking to users. So, for example, like I can share a story. When I worked for Google Chrome, I had to work on one of the biggest challenges of Google Chrome, the biggest ever, which is tab management. So I work for Chrome iOS, and we know from numbers that a lot of users do have plenty of tabs open. Like when I say plenty, really plenty of tabs, hundreds of tabs open. So that's not something ideal. As a product manager, you want to limit that from a performance perspective, from a memory perspective. You want to make sure that people are having the best experience. But how can we force users to close their tabs. So before even forcing them or doing whatever, we had a lot of interaction with our users. When I say a lot, like a lot of sessions, we sit with them. We don't guide them. We just ask them, hey, how do you navigate? Show me how do you navigate through your tab. Can you show us your tab grid and tell us how you can find the tab? And these kind of sessions are so beautiful because like most people, some of them might feel frustrated, some of them will feel stressed, others might even feel shame because some would say, oh, sorry, I don't usually have so many tabs open and I just don't care. I just want to listen to what you're saying and I capture your feeling. So this is the best way to capture the emotion motivators, by talking to users and paying attention to not only what they do, but how they react while doing the thing. Now, the second question, which is about how can I make sure that I have the right number, it's usually by how repetitive is that emotional motivators. Like you prioritize them based on how many users are affected by this emotional motivator, how many times it gets repeated, etc. So it's, again, there is a priority process that you can put in place.
Got it. So in the end, it still come back to the what you say about the emotional persona and
Yes,
really based on
exactly.
data to go
Exactly.
build
If
that.
you do the
sales list.
motivation segmentation right, then you have a priority of motivators.
So thank you so much.
Yes.
So let's say that you got a perfect delight model and all the feature laid out when it comes to a great mix of like a great balance of being delightful but also being functional. Um, what would the measurement? What would that measurement look like once you execute on those features? And what are some examples of learnings that you've had in the past? Because I imagine the initial model there might have been assumptions being baked in. So I want to learn about like the last few steps when it comes to measurement and learning.
Yes. So the question is about how do we measure the light, actually. And I want to say two things. The first thing is that the light do not have immediate impact on product metrics. It has impact over time. So this is the one of the rare things what you don't see impact on the next quarter. However, you will definitely see impact over time. And by the way, when I started writing about this book, I told you, like, I started doing research again, and I started to look like who did study emotional connection in the field nowadays. And I was so lucky because I found out that very recently, just over the last 2 years, there have been giants like Deloitte, Deloitte, McKinsey, Capgemini, and Harvard Business Review. They studied the exact same phenomenon. They published the exact same studies, like with different personas, of course. They studied the impact of emotional connection on product adoption. And so when I read through all these reports, I found the consensus. The consensus is that emotionally connected users are twice more likely to buy your product, so they double the revenue, twice more likely to recommend your product, so it doubled the referral, and twice more likely to stay longer, so it doubled the retention. Think about the 3R, like retention, revenue, and referral. So of course, these never occur within the, let's say, a month or two of the release of a feature. But the best way to think about that is that when you invest in Delight, you're creating a brand, you're creating a personality to your product, and you are increasing the loyalty. If you're, however, curious about immediate metrics, at Google, we used to have a metric that we call HATS. It stands for Happiness Tracking Survey. So the good news is that this method has been published by Google Labs, so a research lab. So there's a paper that describes exactly the methods. And it's all about measuring the happiness of users toward a specific feature over time. And it's very related to measuring delight. Yes. Thank you, Dan, for suggesting the order.
Yes, hi. I'd like to get your perspectives and some thoughts about the correlation between user retention and product delight.
Yes. So staying longer, you mean?
Yeah.
So there's definitely every time we publish the feature, let's say we look at adoption, which means like are user curious enough to use the product? But that's usually not an indicator of delight, because curiosity, like sometimes you want to use a feature because you're seeing it for the first time. The indicator of delight is if people are staying and repeatedly using it. And that's, for example, something we did a lot at Google Meet when we introduced like features like background replace, one of the features that my team contributed in launching it. We measure how many times users are using the feature. And the same for the seasonal backgrounds, because there is a huge correlation between I like the feature and I reuse it as many times as possible. There's actually, I want to highlight one thing. I said earlier that there is this concept of surprise in delight. And what surprised you today is not very likely to surprise you tomorrow. And this comes with this effect that we call the habituation effect. Because, I mean, it vanishes over time. And so it's really important to notice that delight has to be continuous. You have to have a strategy for continuous delight. That's why, for example, since we're talking about background replace as an example, we first introduced background replace as a static image. And then we quickly, like a couple of months later, we introduced video background replace. And then we realized that this could be better. So we did immersive background replace, where you can have this like accessories and like slow and lighting. And very recently at Google Meet, we launched the AI generated personalized background. Why do we do that? Because we want to keep this entertainment and we want to keep this surprise over time. Otherwise, we may lose the traction, the loyalty, or even the retention that we're talking about.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
How do you prioritize when you do features, the functional features versus the delight features? Like, how do you, like, what framework or ideas do you have around how to structure that so it becomes woven into the process? I mean, I saw your grid, but I'm curious as to hear how you would how that ties in.
I will share from my personal perspective how we did that. And the thing that I really talk about is that when I joined Google Meet, I was the PM for delight. Actually, what people don't necessarily know is that every product at Google do have a dedicated team for creating delight. And I understand that it's a luxury. Not all company can, of course, afford having a delight team. And that's why I rarely talk about how we did at Google Meet, because all what I had to do is to build delight at Google Meet. So the best example to answer this question is from my experience from Spotify, because at Spotify, I was not the PM for delight. I had a super competing, like I had a backlog and a roadmap where like functionality was continuously competing with delight. But what made things work was how much leaders were pushing for creating like this personality and the brand behind the product. So I remember at some point we have been working on lossless. You know, lossless is like this just got released, by the way, after 4 years. So lossless is like this uncompressed tracks, but at the same time we have been worked on canvas. Canvas is like when you open the track and you see this mini clip instead of having the image of the album, because we want to make sure that the roadmap is a bouquet of some functional aspects and delightful aspects. So something that I personally made or I've seen working is I color the label. So all the lights features has been in pink, so that when I look at my roadmap, at least it's visually clear that whether it's all blue or a mix of blue with pink. And I highly recommend that, because we are highly influenced by how things appear in our roadmap, and we don't want it to be full blue.
So thank you. So from a higher level perspective, though, it's like if I mean, for myself, like I'm working on my own product. From that perspective, like it's really kind of grounded in like the strategic imperatives that I have for the business and how that's going to be. So it's kind of like, it's like, but your point is to sprinkle it in so that it's not just that you're saying make it part of the roadmap, so it's part of every release that happens.
Yes, and I want to add one more thing. If my advice is to shift away from delight versus functionality. That's the the first advice I need to give. We need to move away from delight versus functionality and think about delight in functionality. If we already get into that, it's a huge step. And that's the essence of deep delight. We should not be wondering how much delight versus functionality is. Every time you're building a functional feature, think about how can I build it in a way that emotions is in the core, it's part of the experience. It's not about the aesthetic, it's not about the design, it's about the entire experience of the feature. Okay?
Thanks. And similar to actually the last two questions, but maybe with a more practical ask, is as you were explaining it, I was imagining maybe an exercise of mapping out your user journey. So that is not just your roadmap that is correctly sprinkled with good delight, but rather the whole experience of the user throughout their life journey on the product. No, I imagine that a lot of planning could go into that specifically, thinking how to sprinkle delight throughout the life cycle of the user. No, do you have any tips for how to do that? How to try and map that journey, and how frequent, in that sense, the delight intent should be? Are we trying that at every step, every time they do one action, there's delight? Every one, 6 out of 10, like would be the 50 plus 10? Or how would you recommend to look for places to add delight on once you have a user flow?
I think the user journey is a great start because these are like opportunities for connecting with users at emotional level. Of course, if they are in the valley moments, then we have the responsibility to leverage that and make the experience a little bit less stressful. But also, as I mentioned, like the peak moments are also opportunities to connect with users at emotional levels. So the starting point is definitely the user journey, but also it's about the users interviews are really good at allowing us to understand whether this is an opportunity or not. And I can share a quick story, by the way. When I joined Google Meet, the interesting part is that I started at Google Meet right when pandemic hit the world, like COVID-19 started. And it was an interesting time because when I joined there, like Google Meet has been going through an entire shift. Like we have been moving from having calls from offices and clinics and schools into 100% remote. And what I did at that time, I remember like as soon as I joined, the first couple of months, I spent those months trying to understand the emotional impact of this new behavior. We have not started like jumping into what feature should we build for this new way of working, but rather this new behavior, like this shift. What are the consequences related to this shift from an emotional aspects? So we did a lot of interviews, and interview revealed things like boredom. People spoke a lot about we feel bored. People started to talk about low interaction. I'm not interacting enough. There was even a term at that time called Zoom fatigue. And I was very happy it was called Zoom fatigue because, it's always better to put it on the competitor. And so we started listing those motivators, and then we worked on the motivators. You see, like we worked on these like highlights and insights from the interviews to turn them into features. Like for example, for the Zoom fatigue, it was as simple as reducing your self-view contributed into reducing Zoom fatigue, because one of the big causes of Zoom fatigue was the fact of seeing yourself, your own reflection, not seeing others. So these are small things that we worked on in order to make the product a little bit easier to use and more emotionally connected.
So I understand, just to close it out, is that it's more important to find the opportunities.
Yes.
Very interesting to execute them rather than try to schedule when the delight is going to come
Yes.
in the journey.
Yes. Identify the opportunity is a really good way to start. Yeah. You're welcome.
Hi, Nesrine. Your work is truly delightful, so congratulations. It's really wonderful to hear you speak. My first question, I have two. First question is, given that emotions is subjective, and you already talked about when you were back at Spotify, how you were a little bit concerned how they were going to interpret what you were going to present, correct? So on a project basis, or on a product basis, working with people on the product team, engineers, stakeholders, different cultures, there's bound to be a lot of variety of variables there. What were some of your challenges, and how do you advise us to overcome that?
Thank you for bringing that. First of all, since you mentioned this thing of cross-functional aspects, I want to highlight one thing. When I started this, I've seen it in action. Actually, emotional connection is not a new topic. It's been a topic very well covered in design, by the way, and the best books exist in emotional designs. It's very well covered in marketing. Like the best ads are the emotional ads. The problem is that business and products are not talking about emotion, and that by itself creates a gap, and people are not speaking the same language, and we end up losing the focus and losing the goal. That's the first thing. The second thing you mentioned is like this cross-cultural thing, and it's subjective. And you're right, because what pleases me, what makes me happy is not necessarily what makes you happy. And even myself, I might be happy with something that would not make me happy tomorrow. And that's why there is an element that is necessary. It's like fundamental when it comes to delight, which is inclusiveness. It's about asking, how can we make sure this emotional feature or delightful feature is not harmful for anyone? It's it's gonna have the best impact expected. And for that, I have a story to share, because it just happened like last year, by the way. The company Deliveroo. Actually, I mean, a bit like a Uber Eats. They had a nice, it's supposed to be a nice feature. They released something last year in France where it was Mother's Day, and they sent a notification on the phone of their users, and the notification shows exactly like missed call from your mom. So the design looks exactly like missed call from your mom, and then you click on it, it says like it's Mother's Day. Think about sending flower to your mom, and Deliveroo can do that for you. This feature had the worst press ever. Even Deliveroo had to apologize on press, etc. Why? Because it's not inclusive enough. People will not experience this feature the same way. Some might experience joy and happiness, others might feel like anger or even sorrow. So, an interesting part when it comes to emotional connection is to make sure that it's inclusive enough and works for all, and it's not going to hurt anyway.
Good answer. Thank you. Second question is, what are some of the most impactful influences in your life that led you down to do this kind of work?
I think first, maybe my research background helped definitely, for sure, going back into this. And the second, as I mentioned earlier, like having been a PM for Delight was an eye-opener for me, knowing that, oh, actually, there's a theory behind it. There are tools for it. There are like companies who are actually mastering it. So why not evangelizing around that? Why not helping other companies doing it the right way? So on my time, like at Spotify or at Skype, I've been doing it, but it was mixed with so many other things that I was not able to understand that it's a theory, it's a way of working. And when I joined Google, I realized that, there are a lot to share, and I hope I can help other companies do it well as well.
Thank you, Nesrine. This has been very insightful and reassuring on several levels. Similar to our first question, I have a question with a tangent. In like infrastructure, I'm in I'm a product manager in a cloud infrastructure team. So as you can tell, most of our backlog is filled with engineering-led functionalities, even for those that are customer facing. And so I'm curious to know how you would, if you're in such capacity, how you would introduce the culture of delight and bring the cross-functional team, especially the engineering leadership, on board to include, to find delight in even in the functionality, in the functional features that we're building. And if I could add it close to that, thinking about that too in highly regulated industries like banking, finance, or even like the crisis pain management part of healthcare. These are areas where like it's highly regulated and or requires like preciseness and just very functional solutions. So how would you bring delight in such spaces as well? That's my first question.
That's the second, right?
That's part A and B.
I already forgot the first, so I will
First
answer
is
the second.
okay.
So I was expecting this to come, which is like you mentioned regulation, but I don't think like there is any correlation between regulated market and emotion. Like usually people, every time I talk about delight, they come with the question like, hey, Nesrine, this sounds to be more a B2C topic. How about B2B? Is there anything we can apply in B2B? And honestly, from my perspective, I believe that if the users who are using the product are human beings, then of course they deserve their emotion to be honored. And I usually talk about B2H, like business to human, rather than B2B or B2C. And so what I did, like when I started writing about this book, I was actually interviewing leaders and thought leaders from different organizations. Dan was one of them, by the way. And I interviewed people from Intuit, Atlassian, Nero. I mean, the idea was to gather how people are actually thinking about delight in a B2B space. And what I realized that actually B2B or B2C emotions are there. They exist. We can, of course, honor them. It's not the same set of emotions. It's just not the same set of emotions. Like, for example, in the B2B space, the set of emotion could be I want to feel like a better leader, or I want to feel like a better facilitator, or I want to feel like I can impress my boss if that's one of the motivator, of course. It's just like it's not the same set of emotions, but if we gather them right and we list them properly, then we can operate on them. So that's my thinking when it comes to B2B space. And what was the first question?
Similar fashion, but with engineering, being in an engineering-led space, how would you bring delight into that?
Actually, when you talk about engineer-led, funny enough, like when I also wrote this book, I interviewed people from GitHub and I interviewed people from Snowflake, and companies was not supposed to connect with delight. But I was extremely happy and also surprised to see that companies like Snowflake or GitHub invest in delight. They even have pillars, like the interesting part when I spoke to Dropbox, they said we have a pillar called Cupcake. Cupcake, I mean, it's not delight, but when you just smiled when I said Cupcake, and he said exactly the same thing. Cupcake is about adding that smile when users are using the product. For GitHub, they have a metric called DOOF, and the D stands for delight, utility, usability, and market fit. So they measure how much they delight their customers throughout the different features that they ship. So again, very related to your question, it's all about understanding the right set of emotions and then work on them. You know that Snowflake said we have a pillar called superhero. They want to allow their users to feel like superheroes. I mean, terms are different, like superhero, cupcake, whatever. It's all about, it's very related to emotions.
Thank you so much. And that's very, last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What are some thought leaders? You mentioned marketing and the design spaces that they are already leading and thinking about delight actively. So for you, whether in those in spaces or even in the product and design space and user experience space, what thought leaders that you have followed closely or still read or research, talk to?
There's plenty of resources, of course, you can get inspired with. A good resource for me was from Aaron Walter. Emotional Design is a great book. Dan is a great resource, of course. He's been an advocate for Kano. I mean, Kano is a great model, by the way. Sometimes I get that question, like, Kano is one of those rare models that talk about the light. The only challenge that I've seen with Kano is that it starts with categorizing like features into performance, must-have, and delight, but we don't necessarily get into how can we get to delight. So it's a categorization tool. By the way, it's a categorization tool, not a prioritization tool, because if we end up into prioritization tool, we will never get to delight. So it's never enough to say that. But it doesn't get too deep into how, like these emotional motivators, how to categorize them, how to prioritize, etc. Yeah, so, sorry.
You brought up real quick. I would just put a plug in also for Aaron Walter's book, Designing for Emotion. The delight, useful, reliable, functional pyramid is from that. We actually hosted Aaron at the meetup during Zoom because he lives in Georgia, so he could be out here, but we hosted him because he has a second edition of the book out. But my question, I was going to ask about Kano model because that's a long time ago when I was studying, that's the first time I heard the word delighter. So you already mentioned a little bit. I'm wondering if you're going to share a little bit more about how relevant or apply. I totally agree with you. It's not a prioritization scheme. Some people try to use it that way, but love to hear any other thoughts or advice you have about the Kano model.
Yeah. So for those who are not necessarily familiar with Kano model, Kano is a way of categorizing different set of features. Let's imagine that you look at your roadmap and your backlog, and you categorize those features into must-haves. These are the features that, if they are not there, people will be extremely upset. There are performance feature. Those are the features that there they will bring satisfaction. Not there, they will not. People will be unhappy. And the lighters are those features that will, of course, if it's not there, users will not even notice. And if it's there, they will be excited. So that's the basic of Kano. Kano is like this categorization. By the way, there are two more, but yes, questionable and reverse. We spoke about reverse as well. Yes. So the interest, I love Kano. I'm not, this is the foundation, by the way, and I highly recommend digging more into Kano. The only thing is that I, from my perspective, was not able to get to delight just through Kano. Kano is a great way of eyes opening, but it was not enough to get deep into, for example, okay, these are delighters, but how do I get delighters into my product? How do I prioritize them? How do I really make sure that I delight my customers? So this is what was missing for me from the Kano model.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Basically, it's like you can assess your current feature set or benefits and see which ones are delighters, but it doesn't help you generate the delighters.
Yeah, it's a categorization.
Yeah. Got it. Cool.
Hello.
Hey.
So before I got into product management, I was a high school English teacher, and I was there when COVID hit. And the district I was teaching for let us choose between Zoom or Google Meet and Google Classroom. And Google Meet was, I thought, much more grounded than Zoom. And I'll never forget the relief I felt when I started using it and realized that it was a good choice. So, great work. Yeah.
Trying to share. I mean, it's great to hear, of course, even if I left Google for some months now. What I really try to say sometimes is that these features that we love or we appreciate sometimes without knowing comes with so deep thoughts behind. It's a lot of research, it's a lot of identification, a lot of insights that we gather in order to come up with the right features that will get to the right impact for you. But thanks for sharing.
I had a
Yeah.
question not related to that. As we are considering the emotional, side of our products, do you believe that AI is any different from other tools in our toolbox to get the emotional effect that we would like as product managers?
Of course, we need to talk about AI.
Somebody had to get an AI question in there.
I feel like I'm the only one not talking about AI these days. No, but let's be honest with you. Remember, I said something in the beginning of the talk is that we use products for two different reasons. Some of them are functional, some of them are emotional. And what I see nowadays is, of course, with AI, the functional needs are very well honored. Like products are built in days or hours, or like it's very easy to ship functional features. The risk is that this functional path will go very fast and well, and the emotional path will might slow down, and we will I don't want to end up in robotic field of product that don't feel human. So AI or not AI, and even more in AI, where we need there is an urgent need of integrating the emotional aspect into the product. And that's why, like, for example, when you look at ChatGPT, and the most common AI tool, even if there are so many nowadays, the interesting part is not necessarily in the functionality, but also in the way how it's delivered to you. The choice of words, the way how ChatGPT apologizes when it's giving you the wrong answers. I mean, these kind of, this package allows me, at least as a user of ChatGPT, to feel like ChatGPT is a companion. It's not only a product. It feels like a companion, especially now as a solo entrepreneur. It makes me feel like less lonely. And even if sometimes I'm getting shit out of it, like the result is completely crap, it's still like I'm still using it because, again, for this companion feeling I'm getting out of it.
It was your friend who tried. Yep. Thank you.
Hey.
Yes, again for everyone. So just to change from like pick big companies with large budgets and a lot of time. I work with a lot of startups and mostly on project basis, very strict timelines and less opportunity to marinate in the data that I find and things like that. Would it be possible for me to find delight in such small timelines, or is that like something that can only be worked on in a longer based project or like a bigger budget company project?
It's funny because I get this question quite a lot where people are saying, of course you work on Delight because we work at Google and Spotify and Microsoft. And I say like, they are Google and Spotify and Microsoft because they invest on Delight, not the other way around. And so great example I usually share like Slack. Slack was born delightful because they started by having this brand and personality around like delighting customers. So I don't think Delight has a connection with the size of the organization. It's about the strategy. Does the company want to have this brand and personality and emotional connection with the customers or not at all, and they just want to be like complete functional? And it's really risky because here's the truth. If I'm using a product A for the functional reason only, and tomorrow I'm getting product B giving me exactly the same functional reason, I will quickly and easily shift from product A to B. However, if I have an emotional connection with product A and product B is coming out a little bit cheaper, then it's much harder for me to move to product B. So emotional connection is a differentiator, but also it's a way to reduce competition. I mean, it's to make the product even more solid. Sticky. I love the word stick. Yeah.
I guess I want to clarify the question. I understand the importance, and it's something that I want to vouch for when I do the research for these companies. But like it often gets deprioritized with functionality, especially with less budgets. So I think my question is like, is there a way not just for me to vouch for it, but also for me to even find it when I'm in such tight timelines?
Yes.
Because I'm not spending that much time with the product or the users.
I mean, you will not be building delightful features tomorrow. Let's be transparent. You need to build that trust and connection with users. You need to know exactly your users, what they want, what they hate, what they like, what they love. And this, of course, takes time. I'm not saying take time like years, but sometimes it's a matter of continuous connection. It's unrelated example, but I want to share this example because when I left my first job at Nokia, I had like a goodbye gift, and the goodbye gift was as simple as a macaron box. It's simple, but I'm telling you about it today because I remember very well how many times I told my ex-colleague how many times I failed baking macarons. And so getting that gift felt like I felt heard and seen and valued by my team. And what if you think about it that way? What if you think your product is a gift to your users and you don't want to give them a random gift? You want to give them a gift that allows them to feel valued, heard, and seen. It's a bit related to your question, I know, but I also, just to tell you that it's a matter of continuous connection and continuous interaction with the customers in order to get to that right thing that would create the emotional connection.
Imagine like my clients would be like, hey, when I fit a good product, you need to let me spend more time with my users.
Or iterate on it. You can give it at least first time pure functional and then add to it, but don't fall into the trap of having a pure functional features only or functional product only, because then it's going to be very easily eaten by more emotionally engaging products. I guess.
Yeah, very much.
You're welcome. Hey.
I had never met a product manager focused on delight, so it's an amazing idea. Thank you for sharing that. Can you talk more about the collaboration model between delight or product managers who focus on that area with UX team? What does that handoff look like? What would a typical PRD look like? How much emotional journey do you put in the PRD, or do you leave it up to the UX team to figure that out while PM focuses on the feature functionality? Yeah, if you could share your experience.
UXR or UXD?
The UX or design team, whoever they're collaborating with.
Honestly, I was very lucky to work with brilliant designers who are trained and knowledgeable about delight and emotional connection. And that's why I said earlier, like designers are very well trained and educated toward emotional design, most of the time at least. However, the biggest challenge was never with designers and UX researchers. It was mostly about business and engineers who cares about the speed and going very quickly into the user's hand. So most of the time it's about collaborating early on. But I want to share something that might be very related to your question. Every time throughout my career, have been something that hit me very well, and I think trained me a lot when it comes to think about emotional connection. Before even shipping a feature, let's imagine you have an idea. Before even start building it with engineers, we had that habit of creating a story. How are you gonna tell the users about it? So it's usually a collaboration that happens between you, UX, and marketers. And with the marketers, they oblige us to write a story in an emotional way. And how are you gonna onboard your users with your features before even building it? And the reason why it's a hard exercise is because you are already forced to think about how you will sell the feature from an emotional side before even building it. And it's a great way of directing your thoughts toward emotional connection.
Sort of like a PR FAQ exercise, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Nesrine, for presentation. So my question is about emotions because they're the underlying component of delight, right? So when it comes to emotions, there are different types of theories like that they view emotions as from human side point of view. Like the way you talked about emotions, the underlying theories are seeing emotions as a state of mind, right? But there are also another school of thought about emotions that they view emotions as processes, underlying processes in our mind, and the way it helps decision making in our brain. So the question is, have you ever thought about how instead of like putting these side by side as delight, as you mentioned earlier, like seeing delight in functional features, not versus, right?
Yes.
So have you ever thought about introducing delight in a way that it will impact the way the functional part actually functions? Mm,
You mean like how can we create delight in the way the functioning is better?
No, for example, we can our plan is to provide a certain function, like for example, weekly discovery in Spotify. But the way we convey this, the way we provide this, it can be as a result of the emotional state of the user.
Maybe have you watched that Netflix series from Spotify or not? Or maybe some of you have watched it. And the truth or the story that most of people knows or not, by the way, is that what distinguished Spotify in their very, very beginning, like the very first months, was the speed. Was the speed of access to music. Like what was super different from any other competitors that user can click and they get the music. And that was delightful by itself because nobody else offered that. But they didn't only stop at that speed. Speed was an entry. It's a value proposition. It's a good value that you start with. Okay, and in that case, you are delighting in the functionality. Then it's about also building all the surrounding, like all the surrounding features, the complementary features. Then you have to start to think about this delight with functionality and delight in functionality instead of delight versus functionality.
By the way, I would just add, if you haven't seen the documentary on Spotify called The Playlist, have you seen it? Yeah. It's super cool. I think it's 6 episodes. I highly recommend it. Yeah. And the way they do, I'm not going to ruin the hook, but the way they do it's super cool.
And they are talk about this story, by the way, how they really started and distinguished themselves by this.
You know, the CEO's sitting there over the engineer's shoulder. No, 300 milliseconds not enough. You know, he's like literally like there's it's yeah. So it's called The Playlist. I think it's on Netflix. I think yeah, Netflix. So anyway, all right, we take one more question and then we can adjourn and people can hang out and network. Any other questions? Are we done? That's it? No, nothing from Zoom? Okay, cool. Well, then let's just please join me in giving Nesrine one.